Today is the 29th Sunday of Ordinary Time, Cycle B. In the verse reading, it is amazing that Isaiah, writing hundreds of years before Christ, captured his passion, death, in his prophecy of the suffering servant who will redeem Israel and the world. Because of his affliction, he has seen the light in fullness of days. Through his suffering, my servant shall justify many, and their guilt he shall bear. If you have time, please read Isaiah chapter 53 for more on this prophecy, the prophecy of his passion and death. How does our culture measure a successful life? Wealth, academic recognition, social status achieved, fame. Most people tend to define success in terms of wealth, power, and fame. The question is, what is a successful life in the eyes of God? It is one that always does the will of God, performs acts of loving kindness, and will be welcomed into the heavenly kingdom at the end of his or her day on this earth. It is not dependent on what other people believe or think, so long as the life is pleasing to God. One can have a successful life without wealth, fame, and power. Do you believe this? Well, read the lives of the saints. Many of them actually reject power and fame. Do not let others, such as the advertising media, define what makes you a success or tell you what you need to be happy. All they want from you that you should go and buy something. Mother Teresa of Calcutta tells us, if you're kind, people may accuse you of selfish or ulterior motives. Be kind anyway. If you are successful, you will win some false friends and true enemies. Succeed anyway. If you're honest and frank, people will try to cheat you. Be honest anyway. What you spend years building, someone could destroy overnight. Build anyway. If you find serenity and happiness, they may be jealous of you. Be happy anyway. The good you do today will often be forgotten tomorrow. Do good anyway. Give the world the best you have, and it may never be enough. Give the best you have anyway. Mother Teresa of Calcutta. Today's gospel challenges us to rethink the purpose of our earthly life. that offers a pathway to eternal life. Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem and had just predicted his passion, death, and resurrection on the third day. James and John, like us, heard only what they wanted to hear. They ignored Jesus' mention of suffering, but heard the words, "Rise again." They assumed that Jesus would create an earthly kingdom, and they wanted positions of honor, to sit at the right and left hand of Jesus as king. The other apostles were angry at James and John for trying to get ahead of them. They too desired earthly status and power. Eventually, Jesus had to tell all of his disciples that the greatest among them must be prepared to be the servant to others. Jesus is not just a teacher. He is also a role model. To model this teaching, he washed the feet of his disciples at the Last Supper, in spite of the rule that no Jewish male was allowed to wash the feet of servants or slaves. The lack of humility is usually evidenced by what people refuse to do without medical excuse, of course. For example, I do not mop floors. I do not take out garbage. I'm sure you would think of a lot more I do not, what I do not do. These people argue over seats of importance, and they treat those of a lower status with contempt. They show very little compassion or flexibility, and highly annoyed if anything interferes with their schedule or routines. When we think of the story of the Good Samaritan, think about how much he went out of his way to help the man who was beaten by robbers. Of course, to these people who lack humility, you cannot even mention ideas of voluntary sacrifice or suffering, even if it is for a good cause. Our concupiscence, humanity's flawed nature, always crave power, wealth, and fame. We need God's help. St. Paul tells us that we are fortunate to have a high priest, Jesus, who, because he assumed our humanity, knows our weaknesses and our struggles. We do not pray to a God who does not understand our nature. As St. Paul writes, "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who has similarly been tested in every way, yet without sin." The role of the high priest was to offer sacrifice for the sins of the people, and then to pray for them and offer sacrifice for them. Without Jesus' help and guidance, we cannot succeed. Be humble and recognize that we need God's help. And do not be afraid or ashamed to ask for that help. The Eucharist is the memorial of Jesus' passion, death, and resurrection, and the the source of his body and blood, the spiritual nourishment that transforms our lives. We need to ask Jesus at the time of reception of his body and blood to make us more like him, that we may assume the role of the humble servant who is willing to make sacrifices for others.